Today, we're jumping into a legal puzzle that's part detective story, part ethical deep dive. It's a story I like to call The Wolf, the Snake, and the Law. So, stick with me here, because what could a nearly 2,000-year-old brain teaser about a wolf possibly teach us about the kinds of life or death choices we face today? Well, it turns out a whole lot. We're going to dive deep into some ancient rabbinic logic, and I promise you, the answer is surprisingly relevant. All right, so our story kicks off with a really, really strange scenario. The Talmud actually calls it the case of the perforated innards. Yep, you heard that right. Now, before we get into the details, you've got to understand this one key legal idea. It's called presumptive status. The easiest way to think about it is like innocent until proven guilty. Basically, the law assumes something is fine unless you can prove it's not. So in our case, a properly slaughtered animal is presumed to be kosher or okay to eat. Got it? Good. Okay, keeping that principle in mind, here is the bizarre dilemma that gets presented. A wolf shows up, snatches the innards from that slaughtered animal, and then, for some reason, brings them back. But now there's a hole in them. And this, right here, is the big problem. We have no idea where that hole came from. Was the animal already flawed, which would make it not kosher, or did the wolf just do it? We just don't know for sure. It's a total mystery. The judge in this case, Rav Huna, he comes back with a really clear answer. He says, one is not concerned, rely on the presumptive status of permissibility. In other words, since we assume the animal was fine to begin with, we just stick with that. The meat is kosher. Simple enough, right? Case closed. Or maybe not. Because almost immediately, a brand new case gets brought up that seems to completely contradict the first one. This is what I call a tale of two holes. And here is the contradiction, laid out plain and simple. In the wolf case, which is about a ritual law, the ruling is lenient. It's permitted. But then you have the fig case. Here, there's a risk of actual physical danger, like snake venom, and suddenly the ruling is forbidden. It's the same kind of uncertainty, but two totally opposite outcomes. So this is the real heart of our mystery. Why the different rulings? In both situations, we have no idea what actually happened. We don't know who or what made the hole. So why treat one with a shrug and the other with extreme caution? And this is the very question posed to Rav Huna. His answer? It's short, it's a little cryptic. He just says, are you comparing danger to prohibition? Danger is different. And that one little sentence kicks off a huge debate to figure out, okay, but why is it different? And that brings us to the next phase. This is where things get really interesting. Welcome to the rabbinic debate, where you've got the sharpest legal minds of the time trying to figure this whole thing out. One of the sharpest, a scholar named Rava, he's just not buying it. He pushes back, asking, what is different? We are also strict about uncertain prohibitions. He's pretty much saying, hey, that distinction doesn't really work. Usually when we're in doubt, we're strict. Both of these should be forbidden. So then another scholar, Abaye, he jumps in to defend the original ruling. He tries to prove the point with two more examples. He says, look, in case one, a ritual issue, we're lenient. But in case two, where there's a risk of danger, water a snake might have touched, we're strict. It's forbidden. See? He's arguing danger really is treated differently. But Rava, he is relentless. He just brilliantly picks apart Abaye's argument. He explains that the lenient case Abaye brought up, that's not a general rule. It's a very specific, one-of-a-kind legal exception. And because it's a total outlier, you can't use it to prove a larger point. So the debate is basically at a standstill. The argument goes back and forth, until another sage, Rav Ashi, brings in the final piece of evidence, the one that's going to crack this case wide open. It's called the flask of water test. And this final test is just so clever. Okay, so imagine scenario A. You leave a flask of pure water out, and it's uncovered. You come back later, and you find that someone or something has put the cover on. In this situation, the ruling is the water is now impure. Now, check out scenario B. You take that same exact flask, but this time you leave it covered. You come back later and find that it has been uncovered. And the ruling this time? The water is not considered impure. It's fine. So what gives? Why the completely different outcomes? It's the same water, the same flask. What is the most likely, the most logical explanation for what happened in each of these scenarios? And here is the brilliant aha moment. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi explains it perfectly. It is the typical manner of creeping animals to expose and not their manner to cover. Think about it. A weasel or snake might knock the lid off a flask to get a drink, but is an animal going to put the lid back on? no way, a person must have done that. And since we have no idea if that person was ritually pure, we have to assume the worst. The ruling just follows pure, simple probability. And all of this brings us, finally, to the verdict. The one big principle that solves the whole mystery from the very beginning. Safety first. So here's what it all boils down to. The legal system is totally fine using logic and probability when it's just dealing with ritual rules, like in the wolf case. In those situations, you can be lenient. But the moment there is any uncertainty, no matter how small, that involves potential danger, like snake venom, the ruling is always strict. Probability just goes right out the window and caution takes over. And the Talmud itself just wraps it all up with this incredibly powerful and definitive statement. It leaves no room for doubt. It just says, learn from it that danger is more severe than prohibition. The priority could not be more clear. So what does this whole ancient legal fight really show us? Well, it shows us a really sophisticated system trying to deal with uncertainty. It uses logic, it makes assumptions based on typical behavior to solve tricky problems. But most importantly, it creates a hierarchy of values. And at the absolute top of that pyramid, it places the preservation of human life and safety above any other rule. And really, that leaves all of us with a pretty big question for our own time. How do we balance rules and risks in our own lives? From huge public health policies all the way down to our own personal safety choices. This 2,000-year-old debate is a powerful reminder that where we decide to draw that line says absolutely everything about what we value most.